A police officer was driving on the highway when he saw a tractor trailer that was pulled over on the side of the road. He looks up at the driver and says, "Hey, do you need any help?" And he kind of looks down and shrugs and just says, "No, I'm okay." There was something off about this guy. He couldn't tell what it was. And so the police officer, acting on a gut instinct, says, "Hey, can you step out? Do you mind if I talk to you outside of your vehicle?" And so very reluctantly, the driver kind of slithers his way out of the vehicle, making sure that he doesn't fully open the door to kind of let the officer see what's going on inside his cab. Over the course of their conversation, the officer just kind of had enough and he said, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to need to search your vehicle." He opens up the door and goes inside, and there's nothing out of the ordinary in the front two seats. But when he looks into the back section where there was a sleeping compartment, he sees there's this woman huddling in the corner of this sleeping section looking absolutely terrified. The officer immediately gets out and he grabs the guy and he puts him under arrest. As he's arresting him, the driver is saying, "No, she wants to be here. She chose to be here." But the officer didn't buy it and he said, "You're under arrest for kidnapping." The officer puts this guy in his cruiser and shuts the door, and then he calls for backup. When backup arrived, they were able to take the woman out. She was unhurt. She survived. But it would turn out that she was one of the very, very lucky few, because the driver was Robert Rhodes, aka the truck stop killer, who over the previous 20 years had killed over 50 women. He was one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. But the crime that the truck stop killer was actually known for was the kidnapping and murder of a woman named Regina K. Walters. Regina was a young woman who came from a broken home, and at the age of 14, she ran away and began hitchhiking across Texas with her boyfriend. In February of 1990, Rhodes picked up Regina and her boyfriend, who were looking for a ride. Rhodes almost immediately kills Regina's boyfriend and takes Regina captive, and he keeps her chained up in his traveling torture chamber for several years before ultimately killing her as well. After Rhodes was finally arrested by this Arizona police officer on the side of the highway, the investigation searched Rhodes' house, and they found some pictures. This is a picture of Regina K. Walters in the abandoned barn where her body was ultimately found. Immediately after Rhodes took this picture, he ended Regina's life. Keith Sapsford was living with his parents, and he was desperate to travel the world. Keith began trying to run away from home, not because he didn't want to be around his parents, but just because he saw it as his only way to, see the world. But every time he would run away, his parents would quickly find him and bring him back home. His parents lacked the resources to be able to afford that kind of thing. However, they were able to pull a little bit of cash, and the three of them did go on a nice European vacation that his parents were hoping would kind of calm down his desires to want to travel all the time. It really had the opposite effect. Their concern for their son would only grow, though, because he would find ways to sneak away and be gone for longer and longer stretches of time, and they're thinking it's only a matter of time before he really gets hurt. They ended up enrolling him in this very strict boarding school that was for boys with behavioral problems, and they were hoping that the staff at the school was going to be able to kind of calm their son down. But unfortunately, the school really had the opposite effect, because the school, in a sense, was like a prison. You weren't allowed to leave. And so immediately he's looking for ways to escape. 2 weeks after arriving, he would be successful. He would elude the staff and he would escape. 3 days after he had escaped this boarding school, he found his way to the Sydney airport. Now, this is the 1970s, and it was far easier to get into an airport than it would be today. And so Keith walked across the tarmac to a plane that was bound for Tokyo, and he climbed inside the wheel well. He tucked himself in there and he waited for takeoff. A photographer named John Gilpin happened to be at the Sydney airport on the same day, and at one point, he was just taking pictures of the tarmac, and he began taking pictures of a plane that was taking off, and it was the same plane that Keith had snuck into. He just took a series of pictures of it, puts his camera away, doesn't think twice about it. A week later, John was looking through his photos, and he stopped when he saw this picture. John had inadvertently captured the final moments of Keith as he fell nearly 200 feet to his death. As soon as the pilot took off, the wheels were retracted, opening up that wheel well for a brief second, and there was nothing for Keith to hold on to, and he slipped out. But even if he had not fallen out, he almost certainly would have died from freezing temperatures and lack of oxygen at altitude. Just know that I really appreciate your support, and until next time, guys, that's going to do it. See ya.